By mid-June 1864, the Confederacy was in a desperate spot. General Grant had cornered Robert E. Lee at Petersburg, essentially taking the South's best army off the board, but the war was far from over. In a final Hail Mary attempt at victory, Confederate armies still roaming free launched three audacious, last-ditch invasions. They would threaten Washington, D.C., Kansas City, and Nashville, gambling everything on a long shot. All three would end in absolute disaster, burning out the last of the rebellion's military strength and setting the stage for the war's final act. It all started at Petersburg. If the Union's Army of the James had just pushed a little harder on June 9th, the story might have ended right there. The defenses were thin. Grant ordered another attack on the 15th, which actually broke through, but hesitant Union officers let the opportunity slip away. By the time Grant sent in the more aggressive Army of the Potomac, it was too late. Lee had arrived with reinforcements. After a few more bloody attempts, Grant settled in for a siege on June 18th. The press called him a butcher, but Grant knew the grim math of war. Disease in the siege camps was a far deadlier killer than enemy bullets. A costly battle was better than watching his army waste away. Across the trenches, Lee was even more terrified of a siege. His army of Northern Virginia was built for speed and daring attacks, not sitting in muddy trenches. Morale was plummeting. He knew a war of attrition was a losing game. He had to break the siege, but a direct assault was suicide. To make matters worse, a new threat emerged in the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia's breadbasket. A Union army under David Hunter was burning its way south, threatening Richmond's last reliable food source. Lee had no choice but to send 8,000 men under General Jubal Early to stop him. This desperate move created an unexpected opportunity. Hunter, his supply lines cut, retreated into West Virginia, leaving the path to Washington, D.C. wide open. Lee saw his chance. He ordered Early to invade Maryland, hoping the panic would force Grant to pull troops away from Petersburg. Early's 16,000 men were in Maryland by July 5th, marching straight for the capital. Grant wasn't too worried at first, but only one man truly saw the danger: General Lew Wallace. With just 2,500 troops, he raced to Monocacy Junction, the key crossroads to both Washington and Baltimore. He knew he couldn't stop Early, but he could delay him. On July 9th, reinforced to 5,800 men, Wallace made his stand. Early's attacks were repulsed, forcing him to waste precious time flanking the Union line. By the time he won the field, he had lost an entire day. That lost day was everything. When Early reached the outskirts of Washington on July 11th, Grant's veterans were just arriving to man the forts. As skirmishes erupted, President Lincoln himself came to observe the battle, becoming the only sitting president to come under enemy fire. By the next day, it was clear Early couldn't break through. He retreated, but his escape and subsequent raid into Pennsylvania was the last straw for Grant. He created a new army under the aggressive Philip Sheridan with one simple order: destroy Early's army and burn the Shenandoah Valley to the ground. Sheridan did just that. At Cedar Creek on October 19th, Early launched a surprise attack that almost worked, but his starving troops stopped to loot the Union camp. This gave Sheridan time to rally his men and shatter Early's army for good, a victory that helped secure Lincoln's re-election. Meanwhile, far to the west, another Confederate gamble was failing. In the forgotten Trans-Mississippi region, General Sterling Price had long dreamed of liberating his home state of Missouri. His superior, Edmund Kirby Smith, thought Price was a fool and knew Missouri was a lost cause. But under political pressure, he hatched a plan. He'd let Price lead a grand raid into Missouri. If by some miracle the state rose up in rebellion, great. If not, it would prove the Missouri politicians in exile were liars, and Smith could finally be rid of Price and his delusional followers. The plan was a mess from the start. Price, now in command, dallied, giving the Union time to prepare. Instead of a swift strike on St. Louis, he got bogged down attacking a small fort at Pilot Knob, His army, swollen with unruly guerrillas, became a slow-moving parade of plunder. Union General William Rosecrans reinforced Jefferson City, forcing Price to turn west. He was now caught between Rosecrans' cavalry chasing him from behind and another Union force under Samuel Curtis blocking his path at Kansas City. The climax came at the Battle of Westport on October 23rd. Outnumbered and caught between two armies, Price made a stand to save his massive wagon train of loot. Curtis and his Kansas militia held the line, while Alfred Pleasonton's Union cavalry slammed into Price's rear. Threatened from three sides, Price's army broke and ran. The retreat was a nightmare. Harried by Union cavalry, Price limped back to Arkansas in December with less than half his men and even fewer supplies than he'd started with. The Great Missouri Adventure was a humiliating failure. It proved once and for all that Missouri was a Union state, and it voted overwhelmingly for Lincoln. The final, most foolish gamble was unfolding in Tennessee. Defying all logic, General John Bell Hood was leading the Army of Tennessee North on a fantasy mission to liberate Tennessee and Kentucky. Sherman, who had just burned Atlanta, wasn't worried. He simply detached General George Thomas and an army to deal with Hood while he began his infamous march to the sea. Hood's invasion was plagued by delays. By the time he started moving in late November, the Union was ready. At Spring Hill, a colossal command failure allowed an entire Union army under General Schofield to slip right through Hood's grasp during the night. Enraged, Hood caught up with Schofield at Franklin on November 30th. Ignoring the pleas of his generals, Hood ordered a suicidal frontal assault against heavily fortified Union lines. At 4 p.m., 20,000 Confederates charged. They briefly pierced the center in brutal hand-to-hand combat, but were ultimately thrown back with catastrophic losses. The Army of Tennessee was effectively destroyed in a few short hours. 6 Confederate generals, including the brilliant Patrick Cleburne, were killed. Hood had lost over 4,500 men. In a final act of delusion, he pushed his shattered army onto Nashville. There, General Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga, was waiting with 55,000 men. He took his time, retraining his cavalry and letting the winter weather weaken Hood's demoralized troops. Finally, on December 15th, Thomas attacked. In a perfectly executed to-day battle, he shattered what was left of the Army of Tennessee. The pursuit was relentless. By the time Hood resigned in January, his army had ceased to exist as a fighting force. These 3 disastrous invasions in the fall of 1864 spent the last of the Confederacy's strength. With Lincoln re-elected, any hope of a negotiated peace was gone. The rebellion's resources were exhausted. All that remained was the final endgame at Petersburg. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. Also, do well to check out our other videos for more fascinating stories from history. Your support helps us create more content like this. We'll see you on the next one.